Welcome back to another episode of Exploring the Arts. My name is Ian McMillen.
And I'm Joel Thiele.
And today we are here with Mr. Aaron Snell. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so with all of our guests, we kind of just start with a little introduction about who you are and what you do for the college. So I'll kick that to you.
Well, I wear a lot of hats
Okay.
here in Moscow. We've been here for 6 years now.
Yeah.
And the biggest hat I wear is at Logos School. Actually, I'm the music and choir teacher, upper elementary through high school.
Okay.
There at Logos, and that was really what brought us to Moscow.
Yeah.
Was coming for Logos for me to work and our kids to attend. But there's genetic relationships between Moscow and NSA,
Yep.
or Logos and NSA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually also wear some New St. Andrews hats as well.
Yeah.
I'm involved musically with NSA, administering the music camp, summer music camp that NSA hosts at the end of July. I also run the National Honor Choir that's partnered with the ACCS. It'll happen in June at the ACCS National Conference. And so I'm in charge of running that. I also teach at the Summer Music Institute's a teacher training program for music teachers called Chenaniah Summer Music Institute. And so I'll teach, that's a couple weeks in July. So it's a lot of summer stuff that kind of fills up the other part of my year.
And talk a little about the music camp and the honor choir. What does that look like?
Sure.
What do students do there?
I mean, yeah, one of the big emphases of NSA, at least for freshmen, right, is to kind of music education, right? Especially for a lot of people with diverse backgrounds who may not have
developing musical literacy.
Yeah, like being able to, worship God. So how does, to Joel's question, how do those things during summer foster that? And grow
So it's really grown over the years. All the sort of summer music programs that NSA has.
Yeah.
The music camp is the one with the longest longevity. It's been going for 13, 14 years, something like that. Dr. Erb brought it with him when he came to, however long he's been at NSA, is how long the music camp's been going. He brought it with him here, but it was very small when it first started. Yeah, and now we are maxed out. I think we are over 460 students this year, currently enrolled. So that will be our largest music camp to date, and we're really maxed out with our space. So we made it as big as we could this year to fit as many people. We still have waiting lists for every grade level. So that's a week-long program, summer camp, a day camp. So people come from all over the country, as well as locals to Moscow, enroll their kids in it. And it's a day-long program, half day for young kids, kindergarten through third, and then a full day for fourth through graduated seniors. And, coming to it, having never done a music camp before and watching it that first year, my church background prior to coming to Moscow had done a lot of VBS type things, right? And pluses and minuses there, but watching the music camp, it was like, okay, this is sort of like VBS, but way better and way more glorious, because what it actually is it's not just a Bible camp that incorporates singing sometimes. It's a summer Christian music camp that's focused on God's word, but is all sort of geared towards creating something beautiful and glorious at the end musically.
Gotcha.
So the students are learning how to engage with music at different levels depending on their age level, and they all come from different backgrounds, different experience levels, but they're being led through what it takes to prepare music for glorious performance. And so they're really roped in as music participants, not just consumers or somebody along for the ride. They're learning how to make the music, and so it's really it just has this glorious culmination at the end of the week. It's Monday through Friday for the camp, and then Saturday is the concert.
Yep.
And in the camp throughout the week, you've got multiple choir rehearsals, classes that help you understand what you're looking at on the page and things like that, as well as Bible classes and different activities and stuff. But it's a lot of rehearsal all the way to the concert, and it's just a glorious culmination to a really fun and exciting week. So it's just gained this momentum over the years, and it's a wonderful thing. So thrilled to be. I've taught at it for a number of years, and this will be my second year as the administrator for the event. So that's the end of July, and it's really funny. We have registration for it opens at for March 1st, right? And nice. we put out sort of the save the date, and we put out the registrations coming sort of marketing, and this year, within 24 hours, it was almost entirely full. Wow. There were people literally at midnight waiting for it to open. We were having registration from midnight on all through the morning. People were registering their kids because they knew the spots go really fast, and we got to jump in to get our kids in if we want them in. So it's a very popular event, and we're busting at the seams.
Classes at NSA, you got to jump on those. Some of them fill up.
Elective classes, especially.
It's really great.
No, that's interesting though. It sounds like there's a big need and want for parents to have their kids musically educated and be able to understand that sort of stuff.
And there's only so much you can do with that in a week's time. It's really just dipping your toe into it. The idea is to just give them a taste, to sort of orient their affections, so that singing with a choir is something I love doing.
It's not awkward or anything.
It's something I really love, and having this performance is something to sort of give them that taste of it, and then hope that they find other ways to engage with music throughout the year. And NSA has had a program, sort of a weekly program called Schola Cantorum for that purpose, for younger kids, to train them in music literacy. And so we kind of hope that locals get plugged into that. And if they're not local, we have tons of NSA graduates who now have their own kids that are scattered across the country, but bring their kids in the summer for music camp. So it's sort of a touchstone way for alumni to keep involved with the college and get their kids connected to it. And so so it's sort of just to get their appetite whetted for it.
Gotcha.
But our goal would be for for a crop of this is my goal at Logos. This is sort of the purpose of having an outreach that's not just for the college students at NSA, but sort of broader ages, is to raise up the next generation of worshipers who are equipped to sing well and to sing to God, and that our worship, the tangible expression of our worship in song, is something that will shake the world. That it's not a tepid, anemic thing, or something that relies on loudspeakers with high decibels and lots of sound production value, and some really good musicians on stage to carry it. It's something that the congregations carry. That's really the goal here, is to have the next generation of worshipers be prepared to sing well, so that singing can make a stand in the world, and the worship can have an impact in that way.
So pushing that a little further, why is I guess music itself and the musical literacy, especially in our children, so important to you? So part of it, what I said is you want to, from a classical perspective,
education is not just filling the mind; it's training the affections. And so and there's some things that happen really, really naturally with music specifically in doing that with kids. There's a natural fit to affection training in music, and so it's why and also even just with learning. I mean, we learn our ABCs by singing them. Right? There's this cutting with the grain that music develops us in the right ways, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, as humans. And so there's a broad benefit to an educational benefit to music training. It's not just a compartment. You get music training, check that box. It spills out into everything. It has this natural connection to joy. And so it makes what you're doing joyful. And so incorporating musical literacy into and music training into education, I call it the bakery effect. So you have, if you've walked into a bakery, you smell the smell of fresh baked bread, and everybody starts salivating and bread, right? Even if you're on a no carb diet, you can't help it. And but that's what music is in an educational environment. It's the aroma of joy in the students' educational life, and it just permeates everything. And so schools, I think, should be singing schools. They should be a school where you have that culture of singing as part of what everyone does, and it permeates everything. But then specifically, if you talk about the benefits of the musical benefits of a musical literacy education, where you're teaching not just teaching students to sing, but to understand music, to think musically, to understand music as a language, the written and oral language. What you're doing the same thing there as you do when you teach them to read English, or teach them to read Latin, or teach them to read anything. You're giving them access to a treasure. There's treasure trove that has been built up over the centuries, that in our day and age, even in English, or what, if you think more strictly language literature, many people are ignorant of. It's laying there and nobody knows it. And so you give them, by giving them that language as a language, written and oral, you give them access to treasure. And the same thing is the case with music. There is a treasure room of music in Western culture that is informed by the Christian faith. That's an outgrowth of the Christian faith. And so for those students to grow up into the stature of their predecessors, we look back to, in church history, we stand on their shoulders. We're not a flash in the pan that's just, it's this moment that matters and nothing else matters before it. If there's a continuity in church history, then those children are the heirs to what has come before, and so they are getting access to Bach and to Beethoven and to the storehouse. That's theirs by right. And all you need you need the tools to be able to open, you need the key to be able to open the chest, and there it is for you. And so that's part of what we're doing too, is giving them access.
Cultural recovery. That's good.
What does that look like in your, when you're directing your choir? Like, how do you bring that to your kids doing that as well?
Well, it's in my context, my day job context. I'm at a classical Christian school, which took its cue from Dorothy Sayers, and so we see the advantage of viewing the stages of child development in that particular way. Having the poll parrot or the grammar stage as a certain way the students function, and then there's a development into the dialectic or logic phase, and then there's a development into the rhetoric phase. If you lay that sort of the trivium on top of child development, it maps well. And I can actually speak. Prior to coming to Logos, I was a public school teacher for 15 years, and so saw the approach in modern education landscape.
Yeah.
And the push there was that there was a growing they noticed the gap, the achievement gap between where third graders should be and where third graders actually were. And as you went up in the grades, that gap just gets bigger and bigger. And so the educators were looking at that and going, what do we do? And their idea was to push let's get them the more advanced stuff earlier so that they have more time, and we'll try to close the gap that way.
Yeah.
We'll get our kindergartners writing essays. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. We'll get them, maybe essay is too strong a word, but they were having to write just out of their own minds, things that they were not equipped yet to do as kindergartners, right? And it was that way across the board. There was just this push to try to get the abstract down as low as you could, in the hopes that by the time they were in high school, they'd be able to do critical thinking and things like that. Problem being, that's not how humans are, right? The younger you are, the more concrete you are, right? So I just saw it backfiring left and right, this sort of approach. And I've been teaching for a few years and saw the things wrong with public education. Then discovered classical Christian education and answered every single one of those concerns. So I had this list of concerns before classical Christian education. So back to the question, in my day job, I teach in this context which recognizes that students are concrete, almost exclusively concrete in the beginning, and there's a move towards abstraction as you get older. So the elementary students are doing a lot of memorization, which for an adult is hard, but for them is a joy. Right? I think it really was a key insight for Dorothy Sayers. And so that approach informs how we how we teach everything at Logos, and including music. And so music education for those younger grades in the sort of grammar approach, it's the same way you're teaching English as a language, and then third grade Latin as a language. It's memorization of things. It's sound before sight. Which is contrary to if you've taken piano lessons or instrument lessons. They tend to be sight before sound. So in other words, this is a staff. This is a treble clef. This is an A. You play that on the piano here. This is a whole note, lasts for 4 beats. Play the A. Ding, right? So you learn what it is, and then you do it, right? It's a sight before sound approach. But if you think about language, language acquisition, that's not how we learn a native language. We learn a native language with a sound before sight approach. So before you ever went to kindergarten, you were saying ah. I mean, imagine, a lot of people get this before they go to kindergarten because you've got conscientious parents that are trying to, help them learn to read and everything. But say you went to kindergarten never having seen a letter before, right? You go to kindergarten and the teacher says, this is an A, and it says ah. That's not the first time they have said ah. That's just, they've been doing it all growing up, and now they just get a name for what they've been doing, right? They get a physical symbol and a name for what they've already been doing, and that's the basic approach that we take for music education. And that at Logos and that NSA trains music teachers to do at the Summer Music Institute that we have, which, quick plug, is a 3-year program to complete it, all 3 levels. It's 2 weeks in each summer, and the levels are like, basically think it's like kindergarten, first grade is level 1, second and third grade teaching is level 2, and 4th through 6th grade teaching is level 3. So it's an elementary music training program, how to teach music as a language to elementary students.
Gotcha.
So that by the time they get to junior high, they are literate enough to be able to, you hand them music, just like you would hand them, read this Bible verse, and they don't have to have the teacher say it first for them. They can look at it and read it, to have them be able to do that with a line of music, right? A staff.
That's good.
And so that's that sort of sound before sight. The approach, you teach it as a language where they do whatever concept you want them to learn, and then once they've done it a whole bunch and they can kind of do it in their sleep, for example, so me, right there, that's the very first melodic element they learn, is sort of that so to me skip, and they do that a bunch, and then they find out it's so and me, and they get a name for it, and they see it on the staff, and you prep them for that, but you see it on, and then they can do it. Like every time they see it, they've been doing it for a long time, and it's not like they're learning how to do it. Yeah, they already know how to do it. They're just learning what it looks like on a page, and so that's the approach that you use, that we use and recommend using in elementary teaching to teach literacy to young kids, which is a little different than how you do it as an adult. As an adult, we just learn differently, and you can kind of dump, there is more sight before sound, just in how adults learn things. Yeah. But for kids, it's experiential. You experience it, it becomes part of you, and then you can articulate it later on. Yeah. So
it seems also like a very common thing with just languages in general. Like you're talking about music as a language. When we interviewed Mr. Foster, the Hebrew professor, we were right in the middle of the week-long introduction right before the year started, and a lot of what he did was just talking in Hebrew, saying, holding up a picture of a fish and saying dog, and now we understand that's how you say it. Before he introduced letters or words, and that made it infinitely more complicated.
Right.
But it seemed like that seems like a very pretty standard, really good approach to languages in general.
Yeah, it is, and not all language programs operate that way, sadly. Yeah. But that is sort of the language acquisition works this way. Yeah. And so if music is a language, and I mean, we talk about music literacy. That's you have to. It's a language that you're literate in, right? Then that makes sense that you would approach it the same way. Yeah. And then the fruit you see from that is kids who can do that, who can take a piece of music and read it like they would, to varying degrees. I mean, you're just like you've got, kids who need extra tutoring in math, or their reading comprehension is not. There's an array of ability levels and proclivities and things like that. Yeah. But what we want is broadly, we want that sort of bell curve where you sort of got a kind of an average standard there in the middle that most of the kids are able to do. Yeah. And so that's the goal. And then as you move from concrete to abstract, as you move from that sort of ability to you're learning the grammar of the language, and then you learn sort of more theoretically how it's put together. in sort of a dialectic model, and then, but with the final goal being the ability to be persuasive communicators.
Yeah.
So in younger grades, we don't do as much performance because it's not really the goal, and they don't have the skill set yet to do all of that. But the goal is to give them the tools so that by the time they are working on their persuasive rhetoric, that they have they're able to be persuasive. They're able to have effective communication. So there you think that's in concert settings and in performance settings, maybe not even just concert settings, but even in rehearsals where they're able to engage in a communicative way at a level that younger kids aren't. Yeah. So so that's sort of the trajectory of the whole thing. It flows out of that sort of tiered approach, trivium approach to it.
That's great. Pivoting a little bit, let's talk about kind of your background, right? We're talking about educating kids musically. Like, what were you educated musically growing up? Like, what did that look like?
Kind of. So, I mean, I came from a musical family. I grew up. My dad's a musician. We sang together. It was just music in the home a lot. I tell parents that my kid's in piano lessons, but they're not really enjoying it very much. What do I do? I said, don't let them quit, because my parents let me quit. I started a little bit of piano lessons, and then it was like pulling teeth to get me to practice as a third grader. And so my parents said, forget it. And I wish I would have pushed through. It would have been such a blessing for me. But it wasn't until high school that sort of music as a profession or anything like that came on my radar. I was in choir and band in high school. I went to a public high school in choir and band. And my 1 year we had a choir teacher who was fresh out of college, and he took us to go visit his college. And we did like a festival there and an exchange with the college. And I was like, my favorite class in school I could do as a major. Well, that's cool. And so I put that on the map. And actually, originally, kind of when I graduated high school, I wanted to do composing, and film score is actually kind of what I had in mind. Went to college as a music major. Through the course of that, realized that was an industry I didn't really want to work in, and I took a conducting class, and then it was like, no, that's really what I want to do. And so went into teaching, and taught, because my frame of reference growing up was public school. That was just the default, and went and taught in a public school. But as I mentioned, I quickly became disillusioned with the approach, and so
how did you find classical education, and then kind of Moscow?
Secondly? Well, it kind of all came together. Okay. I mean, you stumble onto classical Christian education, and Moscow comes along with it generally. So it was. I've been teaching for a few years, and my oldest son, who's just finished his sophomore year at NSA, yesterday. Nice. He was about 3, and it was getting to be crisis point for us, because wait, he's going to be in school soon, and I've been teaching in the public school, and I see what's there, and there's no way I want my not just culturally and morally, but even educationally, like we are doing a disservice to these students teaching them this way. So, and we were doing a lot of reading at the time, and I remember reading Nancy Pearcey's book Total Truth. And there's a whole chapter in there on the history of modern education, Dewey on down, and sort of it's a great diagnostic of the problem. It's like puts your finger on, okay, yes, that's exactly why, and that's why I'm seeing this. And so it was a great diagnostic, but it offered no solutions. We're like, okay, well, it's broken. What do we do though, right? And so we were hunting around, and we happened to read there was this little book, I remember, it was by a guy named James Emery White, not James White, but James Emery White, different guy. But it was the book was something like Love God with All Your Mind, or something like that. It was on the life of the mind in the Christian walk. And he had this passing sentence, and he was talking about education and the failures of education in America. And he said, this explains the rise of popularity of classical Christian education in recent years. And I was like,
what's that?
What is that? That sounds cool. What's that?
Nice.
Yeah.
And so that launched us into searching. So this would have been, 2007, somewhere around there, 2006. And so thankfully there was an internet at that time, and we read The Lost Tools of Learning.
Yep.
We read Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning, kind of all of that stuff that came out of Moscow came with our discovery. And so it put Moscow on the map, but we were living in California at the time.
Okay.
And so and the closest classical Christian school to us was a couple hours away, and there was just nothing in our area. So we thought about starting a school. That was around the time of the 2008 economy collapse. Yeah. And so that was not going to happen. Just people were not able to do that.
Yeah.
So we homeschooled instead for about 10 years, as classically as we could, never having gone through it ourselves, but doing a lot of catch up, trying to do a lot of catch up. But then, and then I remained teaching in a public school as a mission focus, where I'm here to serve these kids, and particularly the area I was living in, a lot of broken homes. Yeah. And so one of my main goals was to show my students what a faithful Christian husband and father looked like, because they didn't see that most places. Yeah. So I was there in that capacity, but I never have my kids in my choir, right? Yeah. And so, but the landscape changed. There were a number of reasons that led us out of California and out of public education. But getting my first transgender student was one of those catalysts. Okay. And just sort of realizing that I was going to be put in a position where, even in a missionary capacity, I was going to, particularly with what I taught and how it impacted even things like we would go on trips and take overnight tours, and there were impacts for that. And so I just realized that this job I thought I was going to retire in, teach 30 years and retire in, I don't think I'll be able to. So we started looking at other places, and had family in North Idaho, so we came out here to visited Moscow, visited Logos, and the next year we were here. The next year we were here. So that was 2018 when we came, and been so thankful for the riches in the community here that, we kind of came for our set of reasons and had no idea what all God had in store for us. We have been blessed by the community at large in a host of ways that we had no clue about, really. Yeah. So the community here in Moscow is unique, and the people who've grown up in it have to go away to kind of see it. Yeah. The people who have come to it know it's just not like this most places. So.
All right. Well, that'll about do it. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.